Storyteller Katie Green performs a one-person show about Mrs. Mary Rowlandson, a Puritan who lived in Lancaster, Massachusetts during early colonial times. Mary Rowlandson migrated to the Massachusetts Bay Colony with her family as a child in 1630. This was during the Great Migration, when about 20,000 English people came to New England over a 20-year period. The Puritans came for religious reasons with the intention of creating a pure Christian community, the city on a hill. They believed that the native people were savage devil worshippers, and Puritans attempted to convert them to Christianity. This oppression of native people led to the Metacom's rebellion in 1676. This war is also known as King Philip's War, a war that historians claim to be the most devastating one ever fought in our country. Mary Rowlandson and her children were held captive during this conflict, as were many others. After her release, Mary Rowlandson wrote about her experience. Her narrative, originally published in 1682 as The Sovereignty and Goodness of God, was the first bestseller in American literature. It has never been out of print. Katie Green performs Mary Rowlandson's story to encourage people to explore and discuss issues that are still relevant today: theocracy, racism, and the seeds of war.
I will never forget, never, never. February 10, 1676. I smelled smoke, heard gunshot before mine eyes were even opened. I went to the window, I looked out, and there I saw smoke rising to the heavens, and people running from their homes toward the garrisons. I saw a man knocked in the head, and he fell and was stripped of his clothes, and the Indians were taking the women one way and the children another. In no time at all, there were 37 people in our garrison. 37. Well, of course, our garrison was the best fortified. After all, my husband was the minister of Lancaster. But one person managed to escape. 12 were killed immediately and 24 taken into captivity. Only half of those returned, and God knows what happened to the others. Well, our garrison was filling with smoke, and what must we do? We asked each other what to do, and the answer was, with God, out we must go. I called my son Joseph, 14, my daughter Mary, who was 10, and I picked up young Sarah, then 6 years old, and grabbed my sister's child, and out we went. The children ran one way, and then I heard my sister scream behind me. A bullet went through young Sarah's belly and my side. And I turned back. There was my sister. Her arms were raised to the heavens. She had seen her husband, her son, and now her sister and the babe wounded. She called out, "Oh, please let me die with them." And no sooner were those words out of her mouth than a bullet went through her and she lay dead across the threshold. May she rest in peace with all of her good deeds. It's a terrible thing to see Christians wallowing in their own blood like sheep being slaughtered by wolves. And then there was an Indian by my side. He said, "You come." I said, "You'll kill me." "No, you come." And up until that day, I had said over and over, ever since that day that Lancaster had been attacked by the Indians in August on a Sabbath, and 7 Christians were killed, I said, I would rather be killed than taken captive by those savages. But yet, When I saw their glittering weapons, I went with them willingly. Willingly. My children, Joseph and Mary, had gone one way, and the savages took me up to George's Hill, and there I sat on a snow and ice-covered rock, holding my bleeding child, and I had nothing to comfort her. I could see the smoke rising over Lancaster. I heard later that 40 men had come from Marlborough, but they arrived too late. They came just in time to see the village burning and to bury the dead. It was just as the Most Reverend Increase Mather of Roxbury said. Those savages were placed here by God to punish us for leaving the scriptures. When they painted their faces black, they jumped up and down and they hooted and hollered. They killed all of our livestock. It was piled up, some roasting on a fire, and all of our work going to feed our enemies. We left the next day, and we walked through that wilderness over hills and down, and I carried my babe, and she cried. One Indian took her from my arms and placed her on a horse's back, and there she cried even more. I'm going to die, I'm going to die. Oh, and the Indians didn't like that at all. They gave her back to me, and I walked along until I fell on the snow. For 4 days we walked. We slept on the snow at night. We had no food and only melted snow for water. And then we came to the Indian village Menamesset. And there those Indians stood thicker than trees. I never thought there could be so many of them. And I was told that I would be a servant to a Narragansett sachem named Quinnipian. Well, there I sat in his wigwam with all of those savages, and I held my child. Now Sarah was more dead than alive, and my own wound stiff. And she murmured for water. One woman came over and looked at her, and she said, Master come soon. He knock her in head. That was the comfort I got. Another time, somebody came and said, Master says, take her outside. And so I picked up my child and I went out in the night. It was cold and dark. I walked with my babe. I think they knew that she would die that night. I carried Sarah, and under that cold, dark sky with the stars so bright, like a lamb, she departed from this life. And I held her and walked all night. And the next morning, I rocked her, and I hummed lullabies to her. I walked all day with her. And when nighttime came, I lay her on the ground, and I lay down next to her. Up until that time, I could not bear to look at a dead person. And I, the minister's wife, I was to comfort people who had lost a child or a loved one, and I could not bear to stay in the same room as a dead person. But I lay my child down, and I wrapped my body round hers, and I slept. And the next morning, they knew she was dead. One came to me and said, Master want you. And I leaned down to pick up my child. He said, leave it. And so I went into Quinnapin's wigwam. Oh, he was a heathen. He had 3 wives. One was young, and with her he had 2 papooses. One was old, and he spent most of his time with her. And then there was Weedamoo, a grand Wampanoag queen, and I was to be servant to Weedamoo. I, Mistress Mary Rowlandson, wife of the most Reverend Mr. Joseph Rowlandson, daughter of the proprietor of Lancaster, I was to be servant to a devil worshipper. But I had no choice. At the first opportunity, I left the wigwam and I went out to my dead child. And she was gone. She was gone. I called out, "Where is she? Where is she? What have you done with her?" And an Indian came to me and took me to the top of a hill, and there I saw that the frozen earth had been disturbed, and I understood. They had buried her. And so I left my child in that wilderness, and I committed her and myself to Him who is above all. And I walked. I walked and I mourned. I walked through all of Minnemesset and cried silently. And then I saw my daughter, 10-year-old Mary. She was sitting in front of a wigwam, but as soon as she saw me, she fell to weeping, and they took her inside. And after that, every time I passed the wigwam, Mary wept, and they said, "You, be gone." Oh, those words cut me to the heart. I felt as if the earth would open up and swallow me. I prayed for a sign that God had not forsaken me. And then there was Joseph, my son, standing there. He asked me, "Did Sarah die?" And I said, "Yes." And we wept together. He said he had seen Mary, and that I should not worry about him, that he was with some Indians in a village not too far away, and all of the men from his village, plus all of the men from Minnemesset, had gone together to burn Medfield. He said that his mistress knew that I was here in Minnemesset, and she had brought him to see me. God works in wondrous ways. And there was another Englishman who came to see me while I was in Minnemesset. His name was Robert Pepper, and he said that he had been captured by the Indians in September at Beer's Ambush. September, he had stayed with them, September, October, November, December. 6 months he had stayed with those black-faced devils. But he told me that he had a wound. He noticed that I had been wounded. He said he had a wound in his leg, and an Indian had carried him away and told him that if he placed oak leaves on his wound, it would heal. And it did. And so later, I found some dried oak leaves, and I placed them on my wound. And by the power of God, it was healed.